Every arc in One Piece is filled with incredibly important and epic moments. Just take Marineford, Luffy teaming up with Whitebeard, Luffy awakening his Conqueror's Haki for the first time, Whitebeard dying, Ace dying, Shanks stopping the entire war, and then Blackbeard stealing Whitebeard's Devil Fruit. And that's just to name a few for that single arc. But what is actually the most important one here? That one event in every One Piece arc that has the single biggest impact on the entire story and that the entire arc was built around. And let me tell you, some of these moments will not be what you expected. Just take the very first arc, Romance Dawn, as the perfect example here. Now, of course, there are a ton of important moments just as we start the story here, but many of you may maybe be thinking Luffy eating his Devil Fruit was the most important for the One Piece narrative. And while I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like it is not super important, especially with everything we're learning right now about Gear 5th, Joy Boy, and Nika, it doesn't even come close to being the actual most important moment in this arc, because you could very easily argue that he didn't even need his Devil Fruit to become a powerful pirate. However, the single moment that absolutely needed to happen was this, which then led to this. Because in this moment where Shanks decides to sacrifice his own arm to save Luffy, the red-haired captain teaches Luffy to always do anything possible in order to save your friends, no matter what it costs. Which is exactly the type of selfless action that we've then seen Luffy do again and again and again to save the people that he loves all throughout the story. And actually, we do see this very selfless nature on full display in the very next arc, Shell's Town, where Luffy steps in front of a barrage of bullets in order to save Zoro's life. Now, of course, that didn't actually hurt Luffy, but you kind of see what I mean here. However, that moment of important sacrifice is not the most important moment from the small arc. Nor, I think, is it the reveal of Zoro's 3-sword style, which I have to admit was pretty damn cool when you remember how you felt seeing that for the first time. But rather, it is actually when Zoro steps in front of these Marines here in order to protect Luffy. And what is so important, I think, about this particular scene is not that Zoro saves Luffy. It's not like these scrubs were any real threat here. No, I actually think it is the fact that this is the very first moment where a crewmate expresses their dream to Luffy, and of course the crew goes on to support their own dreams together, even if they fight and even betray each other a little bit along the way. But now this next arc gave us one of the most important moments in the story, and I do bet most of you probably might have even forgot about it. Think about it. Are you ready for it? It is this. Bam! One good solid kick right to the nutsack. Actually, I lied. That's not the most important moment, sadly. I just think it's hilarious to see rereading it. No, really though, beyond meeting Nami in Orangetown, the most important might actually surprise you, because to me, it all starts with this little guy right here. And I guess you forgot this good boy is Chocho, who defends his dead owner's shop from Buggy's evil crew. Now, sadly though, Chocho was defeated and they burned down the entire shop, a truly heartbreaking moment for this little puppy here, but Luffy would soon get revenge for him. And I know this seems like such a small moment in a super small arc, but this is such an important defining feature of nearly every single One Piece arc that follows this one. You see, typically how arcs go is that when we arrive on an island, Luffy makes some friends, in this case Chocho, and then Luffy has to fight to either free his friends or protect their dreams. And oftentimes it's the emotional depth of these moments that make One Piece truly special, even more than the big climactic fights, I think, actually. Just take the next arc here, for example, the Short Island of Strange Animal arc, which is where we first learned of the majesty of One Piece afros. Seriously, there's really not that much else going on here besides Gaimon realizing that he wants to protect his friends, but no one can deny that his hairstyle is absolutely on point. Now, as we next reach Usopp's hometown in the Syrup Village arc, we actually have quite a few important moments to pick from. Number one, there's obviously Luffy finally defeating Kuro, and then the crew gaining their first real ship, but since this is Usopp's arc, I do think that the most important moment is actually this one. Because it's in this scene, I think, that we do see Usopp's most important character trait. Yes, he is weak, and he is mostly a coward, but when his family or his friends are insulted or threatened, he kind of flips a switch and will throw down with anyone just like the rest of the crew. Unfortunately though, the suave Straw Hat crewmate doesn't even get the most important moment in his very own arc, because even though Sanji's tear-jerking farewell at the end of the Baratie arc really pulled on my heartstrings, as did his really tragic backstory, the most important moment of this little arc is, without any doubt, the obvious one: the duel between Zoro and the world's strongest swordsman, Dracul Mihawk. And let me tell you, this fight isn't just important because it's a cool fight. No, it's really the fact that it showed us the true scale of power in the One Piece world really early on. Because you do have to remember that up to this point in the story, Luffy and the crew were pretty much easily taking down bad guys left and right, but with this jaw-dropping defeat where they had no chance at all, we saw exactly just how weak the crew truly were comparatively, at least at this point in the story. So yeah, sorry Sanji, your most-had rival does take the cake for this one in your very own arc, I think. See what I did there with the cake joke and you know, Sanji being a no? Okay. Don't like that joke? Well, Big Mom would probably have appreciated it. And you can appreciate this. Now, I don't think anyone can argue with this one being the most important moment of Arlong Park, I think. Sure, Luffy taking down Arlong's tower was a climactic end to the entire fight, but Nami's desperate plea for help is truly the emotional highlight of the entire East Blue Saga, and even one of the biggest moments in the entire story, I would say. By this point, we've learned that Nami is a strong, independent woman who has sacrificed insanely much to save her village. Pretty much just how her adopted mom did it for her. And yet, when she finally breaks down and asks her friends for help, it's just like a tidal wave of feelings that hits you right in the chest. I mean, just seeing this panel, I just kinda makes me want to pick up a pitchfork and go fight Arlong myself at this point. And beyond the actual story, this scene is often referenced by fans as the moment when One Piece truly became special as more than just being a little battle shonen story. But of course, it's not quite the end of the East Blue Saga yet, because we still have Loguetown, where the most important scene is I don't know actually. It's kind of hard to pick this one, surprisingly. On the one hand, we have the iconic barrel scene here where the crew states their own dreams, but at this point we've already established all of their dreams, so it's not really anything new. And of course, we also have the introduction of this very mysterious character who turned out to be Luffy's father in the end. But I guess if I really have to pick the one moment, I would choose Luffy's execution scene. Which, I mean, in the first place is just so hilarious how he randomly got himself into the situation to begin with, but this also was one of the first real moments when we all recognized the parallels between Luffy and the former king of the pirates, Goldie Roger, because just like Roger, Luffy smiled in the face of certain death. And funnily enough, shortly after, we get yet another such comparison at the end of the very short Reverse Mountain arc, when the former Pirate King's doctor compares Luffy to Roger as well. But I'd actually say that it's what led up to this statement that is the actual most important moment here, because just like everywhere else that he goes, Luffy's greatest ability is the power to make friends with anyone, anywhere. And that includes giant island whales, it seems, because when he painted his own Jolly Roger on Laboon's front end, it showed that Luffy is willing to save anyone who he thinks needs his help. And that of course even applies to Sand Kingdom princesses who are undercover as evil secret agents as well. Which of course is exactly what then happened during the Whiskey Peak arc, when Vivi finally reveals her true identity and asks the Straw Hats to help save her kingdom. Which funnily enough, honestly, isn't all that great a moment in the grand scheme of things, but this first step into the Grand Line adventures was the best that we got from this arc, I would argue. We did also have the introduction to Nico Robin here, but she'll obviously have her very own very special moment in just a few minutes. No worries, you know what I'm talking about. If you do, put a tear emoji in the comments right now and let me know that you predicted what we're going to talk about. Now, the same can't be quite said for Little Garden though, because we got many larger-than-life moments in this dinosaur and giant-filled arc. First off, I still very vividly remember the first time that the crew met the giants Dory and Broggy. I mean, maybe I'm a little bit of a fanboy like Usopp, but who doesn't love giants? And the fact that they were going to be a thing in One Piece Piece made me insanely excited when I first read that arc. Which perhaps explains why I personally think that the most important moment of this little arc was actually the send-off that the Giants gave to the Straw Hats. Yeah, sure, I mean, we do love friendship and all that stuff, but sometimes a moment is just so incredible that it kind of lives in your mind rent-free forever. And that was certainly the case when Dory and Broggy punched a giant hole right through this massive fish to send the Straw Hats off the islands. Like seriously, can you even call yourself a One Piece fan if you haven't practiced your own Hakoku sovereignty at this point? If you haven't, you really should. Come on, get up. You know you want to do it with me. 1, 2, 3. Hakoku sovereignty! I really hope you did that with me, because otherwise that would have been a little bit embarrassing if I did it on my own. Okay, back to adult Manu now here, analysis mode. Next off is Drum Island, where I was honestly stumped on what to pick as the most important moment. I mean, first we have honestly one of my all-time favorite scenes from the entire pre-time skip, where Luffy leaps on top of the castle to protect the flag. And of course, who can forget Luffy literally climbing up a blizzardy mountain, dragging his friends to safety with his very teeth. There's also Dr. Korea's reveal about the Will of D, but at the end of the day, I just can't go with anything other than this quack doctor's very famous last words. When does a man die? Is it when he's shot in the heart with a pistol? No. When he's stricken with a deadly disease? No. When he eats soup from a deadly mushroom? No. It is when he's forgotten. Like, man, that speech still gives me chills whenever I read it to this day, and it just goes to show the incredible power and foreshadowing that backstories have in One Piece. Truly, they are some of Oda's best work in the entire story, and very few of them hit harder than this very moment right here, which also obviously connects to later themes in the story with Joy Boy and Poneglyphs and Inherited Will, all that good stuff. And I promise you, I'm really not trying to make this just a Manu's favorite moments in One Piece video, but sometimes I just gotta go with something that really struck home for me for a good reason, which is exactly what I could say about the last scene of the Alabasta arc. Because despite all of the bloody, really intense fighting, I'd bet that if you asked any One Piece fan what their favorite moment from this arc would be, at least I would say more than half of you would probably tell me that it was this scene right here. And wow, I mean, what an emotional moment this truly was. But is it really the most important one? I mean, sure, it was the end of the first big saga in the Grand Line, and it was a big twist that Vivi didn't end up joining the crew. But if I want to stay true to the real purpose of this video, I do have to say that the most important moment was the heart-pounding finale of Luffy defeating Crocodile. And let me explain why. You see, for the first time in his arc, there was a real chance of Luffy dying. He had no business fighting the Sandy Warlord to begin with, and he only really won because he luckily figured out Crocodile's natural weakness to water. But for Luffy to win this fight against what we all thought was at this point an unkillable, untouchable opponent just really goes to show his willingness to put his own life on the line in order to help and protect his friends. On top of that, he gained his first entire country as an allied kingdom, plus this was when the world government really took notice on him. So yeah, as much as I love Vivi's speech at the end or the reveal of the Poneglyphs for the first time, the most important moment simply has to be Luffy defeating his first warlord of the sea in the story. But now, as important as Crocodile was, his defeat does not compare to this next moment at all. Because during the Jaya arc, Luffy finally meets the man who will become his all-time biggest rival, Marshall D. Teach. Like seriously, this guy is equally as big a dreamer as Luffy, and he dropped easily one of the most iconic lines in all of One Piece ever. People's dreams never die. One Piece sure has some banger quotes, doesn't it? But yeah, shout out to Bellamy here, who really would have been better off staying smashed down into the floor, I guess. Which now though brings us to the arc that somehow has just become more and more and more important over time as the time goes on, maybe being the most important arc in the entire story now, Skypiea. Skypiea. And there's just so much symbolism, foreshadowing, and thematic writing here that it is really hard to pick just one important moment. I mean, for example, the very famous bonfire scene in the forest is often cited as foreshadowing for Luffy's eventual Gear 5th Nika transformation. But even beyond that, this impromptu celebration just shows that Luffy and the crew bring light and joy and party, I guess, everywhere that they go. And yet, I still think that this time I do have to give the most important moment to the end of the final battle, where Luffy smashes the electric god Enel and sounds the long-lost golden bell of Shandora. Because beyond just defeating yet another seemingly unstoppable opponent, ringing the bell also signaled hope and peace for all of the Skypiean and Shandian people at the same time. And on top of that, it also literally fulfilled the dreams of Mont Blanc Cricket back on Jaya, and by defeating Enel, Luffy also foreshadowed his future role of taking down the so-called gods of the world as well. So yeah, in a nutshell, a lot of really important things wrapped up in that one golden punch. But also really, if Luffy wanted to have an easier time fighting Enel, he should have just busted out his ultimate form, Afro Luffy. Like seriously, just gazing upon this majestic sight would have been enough to take down anyone. Unfortunately for Luffy, he didn't really keep this form when facing off to the true threat of the Long Island arc, which was of course Admiral Aokiji. And wow, let me tell you, if you saw this for the very first time, that came as a real shock. We were just coming off a really big high of beating Enel, but once again we were shown that Luffy and the crew still had a long way to go before he could protect his friends from any of the real top tier fighters in the One Piece world. So the moment might just have to go to Aokiji literally freezing the entire ocean. Now, the Water 7 arc's most important moment is going to be a little bit controversial, I think, and that's because I don't think that there is any doubt that Luffy versus Usopp is by far the most important moment of this very specific arc. I mean, yeah, there was of course the entire Robin getting kidnapped thing and the reveal of CP9, Pluton, but seriously, Luffy versus Usopp had the potential to ruin the entire crew. We're talking about completely breaking apart the characters that we've loved for so long, and that would have been absolute tragedy. Now, obviously, that didn't end up happening, but this heart-wrenching fight was the final straw in the cracks that had been building between Usopp and the crew for quite some time at this point. And man, it was really, it is still really hard to watch whenever I see it. Almost as hard as it was to pick just a single moment from the entire Enies Lobby arc, my favorite arc in the story. And when I say it is hard, I really mean it. Because damn, how do you pick? We have Zoro's Ashura, Robin's really depressing backstory, and even one of the most hype moments in the story so far, with the reveal of Luffy's Gear 2nd and 3rd. And those aren't even the best moments, and I honestly can't pick between these last few options. I mean, Robin's I Wanna Live is one of the single most iconic panels in all of One Piece, and story-wise, it really shows that the Straw Hats will do anything, declare war on the government to save their friends. But can you really say that it's more important than Sogeking? I mean, Usopp's speech that helps Luffy defeat Lucci with an earth-shattering barrage of fists. I mean, holy, this is one of the best finishers to a fight that we have ever seen, and it shows that Usopp cares more about Luffy and the crew than his grudge over the Going Merry. But speaking of the Merry, how can we not say that Merry's funeral is also one of the most important moments in the story, because the Straw Hats literally lost one of their own crewmates. Like, how can you compete with that? So I really don't know for this arc. I'll just let all of you decide for yourselves what the most important moment here is. But for me, it's gonna be Robin. Which actually now brings us to the short Post-Enies Lobby arc, which had some world-shaking reveals of its own. I mean, here for the very first time, we learned that Garp is actually Luffy's grandfather, which is kind of weird in retrospect, but yeah, it took that long for us to know that. Then the crew also got a new ship, and Frankie joined the crew, but without a doubt, the single most crucial moment here has got to be the unbelievable duel between Ace and Blackbeard. I mean, come on, this fight between fire and darkness literally tipped the first domino in a catastrophic chain that eventually shattered the balance of the entire One Piece world and left Ace with a pretty big hole to fill, if you know what I mean. Like, let me just say that Katakuri probably liked Ace a lot more after that happens. And now, before we get to the Summit War saga, we first do have to talk about Thriller Bark, which honestly is a little bit of a down arc overall in terms of importance, I guess. At least when it first happened, because there is of course crazy amounts of foreshadowing in it as well. There were some pretty hilarious moments like Luffy pushing the zombie back into the grave, still one of my favorite One Piece moments, and Usopp's entire fight with Perona, but whatever we lacked in importance, my god, did we get one of the most bad moments in the entire story. And I don't even care if you call it the most important or not, because when Zoro says nothing happened, I kid you not, my jaw quite literally dropped open. Like, that's what happened. And I mean, who does that? That never happens in real life. I mean, what a monster of a panel is this? And not only that, it does have really big story significance as well, because it shows just how much Zoro has changed. Remember, back in Shell's Town, Zoro said that he would kill Luffy if his captain got in the way of his dream, and yet here we now see Zoro willing to give his own life in order to save his captain. A pretty incredible transformation and a major high point in Zoro's character arc, and this is just a really big middle finger to anyone who says One Piece characters don't have any development at all. Like, wow. But now with Zoro all bandaged up again, I mean, that happens a lot in the story, the crew now finally reaches the halfway point of the Grand Line. It's here on Sabaody where things really start to fall apart quite quickly for the entire crew. Now, part of me really wants to say that Luffy punching the Celestial Dragon Charlos was the most important part of the story here, because it was just cool and really satisfying to watch, and it really put a world government target on Luffy's back. But I also can't say it's the most important moment, because, well, that would just be a straight up lie. What is the most important is the cyborg warlord Kuma saving the crew by sending them flying around the world. Now, at the time, of course, we didn't even know that he was saving them. We just knew that our friends were disappearing one by one, and this was really painful to watch. Like, seriously, Zoro, gone. Sanji, gone. Nami, Robin, gone. Everyone we know and loved was vanishing before our eyes, and it was the most comprehensive defeat that the crew had suffered in the entire story so far. Like, seriously, it was to the point where we didn't know if the story was just gonna be over right then and there. And now obviously that didn't happen, and Kuma turned out to be saving the crew and sending them off so they could train and become stronger. But yeah, without any doubt, one of the most important moments in the story right there, especially with everything that we've now seen during the Egghead Island arc. But even that isn't quite as important as Luffy showing off the family jewels in Amazon Lily. Am I right? All jokes aside though, Amazon Lily had some minorly important moments, such as turning the pirate Empress Boa Hancock into an ally, but I'd actually say that Luffy letting out his first major burst of Conqueror's Haki here is the most important moment from a story perspective, and if you thought I got it wrong in the intro, well, joke's on you, I knew it was here all along. Which now brings us to the Impel Down arc, where again, it's really hard to pick out any majorly important moments or a highlight here. I mean, sure, Luffy got the snot kicked out of him by the Warden Magellan. Same can funnily enough be said for Blackbeard. Then we also have Blackbeard sneaking in and freeing level 6 prisoners, which are all relevant later on in the story. But honestly, I still just really want to give this moment to Mr. 2, who once again showed what an absolute chat he is by staying behind in the prison so that everyone else could escape on their ship. Which means that now, my goodness, the big daddy of all One Piece arcs, Marineford. And where do we even start here? I mean, there's literally just so much going on. Luffy literally fighting half of the strongest fighters in the world, from admirals to Mihawk to the warlords. Now, of course, Luffy let out his first huge Conqueror's Haki burst, and then we do have everything that happened with Ace. And of course, honestly, I was really close and tempted to put with Ace's death as the most important moment here, and it certainly was for Luffy because it showed him that he could not protect those he loved at any point, no matter how hard he tried, being the one major point in his character arc so far. But from a story perspective, I do think that in the end, Whitebeard's death and Blackbeard gaining a second devil fruit are both more important. I mean, think about it. Whitebeard's death destabilized the entire balance of the world, and Blackbeard's new powers immediately made him a major threat to everyone. And so I think it just... every time I spill my water. A classic. And so I think it just has to be this moment as the most important one here. I mean, it doesn't mean that I don't love Whitebeard's One Piece is real or Shanks arriving to stop the war. There's just honestly way too much good stuff to choose from here. And of course, as heartbreaking as this all was for Luffy, he ended up rising from the depths of his own despair during the post-war arc as well. Of course, it was during these chapters that we got the Sabo Luffy backstory and the very iconic Sake Cup scene where the young friends pledged to become brothers. However, if I actually had to pick the most important moment from this very arc, it would have to be Luffy setting his straw hat down on the rock before starting his training with Rayleigh. Because what a perfect visual symbol of the pause in the journey by acknowledging that he isn't strong enough quite yet and at this point doesn't deserve the straw hats. And of course, all that growth was on full display then in the Return to Sabaody arc, where not only did Luffy shrug off some funky looking fake straw hats, but he also absolutely crushed the Pacifista. And remember, this thing nearly wiped out the entire crew before the time skip, so yeah, safe to say that this display of power takes the top spot for this really short arc. I do have to say that Zoro cutting a ship in half came pretty close. However, as exciting as the start of the post-time skip was, many people found the entire Fishman Island arc extremely disappointing with no real gripping storyline or new interesting characters. Oh yeah, and then there was the entire Sanji nosebleed thing, which was just which was just not great. However, it is clear that Oda was laying a ton of groundwork with this arc for the themes of the entire New World story, so for the most important moment here, I'm actually gonna go cheat a little bit and go with the overall symbolism of the arc, starting with the Fisher Tiger backstory, Otohime's assassination by her own people, all the way up to this moment where Luffy and Jinbei show that humans and fishmen could fight and live together. But now, from a very important thematic moment, let's jump to a moment that is so important that the Straw Hats wouldn't have made it past Dressrosa without it. Because as we see throughout the Punk Hazard arc, Luffy is once again pretty much just goofing off. He almost got killed by the gassy scientist Caesar Clown, and even Zoro had to tell him to take things seriously finally. So do you really think that the crew with this guy as their leader could have come up with any sort of real plan to take down the Yonko? Not very likely, let's be honest, which is exactly why this moment here was so important for the crew. Like seriously, I honestly think that without the alliance between the Supernova Trafalgar Law and the Straw Hats, Luffy and the crew would have been killed by the very first superpower that they crossed path with. It was really a good thing that Law had a really decent plan to get them to Dressrosa safely. Speaking of which, the Land of Love and Passion is yet another doozy of a manga arc with so many moments that we can choose from as the most important ones. There's of course the most tear-jerking moment with Corazon's sacrifice to keep Law alive. On the other hand, we have Usopp's god tier level snipe to save all his friends from this terrifying little girl with potentially the most broken ability in all of One Piece. We even have the reunion between Luffy and his long-lost brother Sabo. But I think none of these really compare in importance to the single fact of Luffy taking out Doflamingo. Because as we were told, Doflamingo is the key to so much of the world's underground illegal trading. He literally controls all the artificial devil fruits and illegal weapons that are sold all around the world, all controlled like a puppet on Doflamingo's strings. So by taking him down, Luffy set even more of the world into chaos than before. Not to mention that the Warlord's defeat weakened the Emperor Kaido's crew and set the Straw Hats on Kaido's Kaido's bad side as well. Oh yeah, plus the world government was just completely embarrassed by Luffy here once again, so it's kind of hard to argue the importance of taking down this evil puppet master. However, Gear 4's introduction was also super important as well, as it was Luffy's first Devil Fruit related power-up in over 300 chapters at this point. And wow, it was powerful, but we will see another gear transformation, of course, coming up very soon. But before that though, we are off to the Zou arc, where I'll be honest, I'm really struggling to keep myself from going with my personal preference here, because I really, truly wanted to put the Raizo is safe moment as the most important one in this arc, and it's really hard not to because of the sheer impact it had on the entire story. I don't know anyone at the time who expected this type of reveal, but the fact that the Minks would sacrifice so much to keep their friends safe was just a mind-boggling display of loyalty. However, if we're strictly talking about importance to the story, I really can't pick anything other than the reveal of the road poneglyph inside of the whale tree. Because you have to remember that up to this point, the main goal was taking down the Yonko, and we didn't even know how to find Laugh Tale to begin with. But from this very moment onward, the direction was very clear. To find the One Piece and become Pirate King, the crew would have to find the other 3 road poneglyphs, and that has been the goal ever since, alongside taking down the other Yonko, of course. And they did find their second one in Big Mom's treasure room on Whole Cake Island then, which of course means that Brook clutching out the poneglyph copies could very easily be the most important moment of this arc, or it could be Pedro sacrificing himself to the Straw Hats, or Luffy learning Future Sight and duking it out with Katakuri. But for this arc, I'm still kind of feeling bad about Zoro stealing the spotlight at Baratie, so I just really have to give our favorite chef the most important moment here, and which one to choose, because obviously there's his first actual kiss in the story, or even him making the wedding cake. But if we're going with Sanji here, it just has to be this moment right here. Because despite all of the messed up stuff that his family put him through, from locking him up as a child to literally abandoning him, Sanji still chose to save all of them in the end because he knew that it was the right thing to do. It was a huge character moment for him, which freed him finally from the trauma of his childhood. Which now of course brings us to the hypest 4 chapters in all of One Piece, the Reverie arc. And let me tell you, there was almost nothing like the experience of reading these 4 chapters or seeing these episodes when they first came out week to week. It was literally game-changing reveal after game-changing reveal after game-changing reveal, from the frozen giant Straw Hat to this guy who really looks a lot like Shanks meeting with the Gorosei, but of course the biggest reveal of them all, which has just completely shattered the way that we look at the One Piece world altogether, was the existence of the secret ruler of the world, Imu. And we are still uncovering the mysteries of this person to this very day, but seeing this character for the first time in action was simply mind-blowing, to say the very least. Almost as much as our next moment from Wano, which I'm not even gonna sugarcoat it. Yeah, of course, the most important moment in this arc is easily, without a doubt, the reveal of Luffy's Gear 5th and the true nature of his Devil Fruit. I mean, come on. It changed so much about how we understand Luffy's powers and even his future role in the story. Plus, Luffy literally died and came back to life here. Like, how can you not pick that as the best and most important moments? Of course, he also defeated Kaido. We had the entire epic Oden and Roger flashback, which was just incredibly hyped, and a bunch of other really cool stuff that happened as well, but nothing comes close to the impact that this moment had on the entire story, going backwards and forwards as well. But speaking of game changers, Egghead Island also brought the full double-barreled heat when it came to lore drops and just sheer unbelievable feats as well. I mean, really, take your pick. Shanks one-shotting Kit, Garb's Galaxy Impact, the reveal of Nefertari D. Lily, the reveal of the God's Knight, a mysterious new powerful character, the mysterious demon powers of the Gorosei. I mean, what else could you want in an arc? Oh yeah, how about maybe one of the all-time most heartbreaking flashbacks in all of One Piece, followed up by the most satisfying punch in the story. And that's of course not even mentioning Vegapunk's speech and all of the insane lore reveals that brought with it as well. But I do think that for now, in terms of impact on the One Piece world and the story, I have to give the most important moment to Vegapunk revealing the true nature of the old One Piece world. I mean, keep in mind that he was telling the whole One Piece world that their planet was flooded in the past and it is going to happen again, and that the One Piece world is this post-apocalyptic kind of landscape where there used to be super advanced technology. Like, if that message does not impact the rest of the world, I really don't know what will. But also, now that the Egghead Island arc is over, there have been so many insane things happening and so many reveals. There were a ton of really important, funny, and really crazy moments and details that you probably missed, which I made this entire video about that you can watch below me right here. As always, thanks so much for watching, and a super big thank you as always to those of you who signed up for my new Patreon. You are really helping us make even more awesome content with new animations and better art. And if you haven't checked it out and enjoy what we're doing here, you can support our work by signing up for Patreon and getting a lot of really cool perks and extra videos, as well as of course your name at the end of this video. Your support really means a lot. Thanks so much for watching, and I will hopefully see you in this next one.